So it is that time of the year where the Premier League is only a couple days away and football content creators begin to make our Premier League predictions for the upcoming season and completely get it wrong, and within a year all look like complete and utter idiots. And of course I'm going to include myself in that tradition today, as I'm going to be doing my Premier League predictions for the upcoming season. And I've got to say, I'm really looking forward to this Premier League season. I think it's going to be very competitive at the top end of the table and at the bottom end of the table this season as well. But just before I get into the predictions, let me know in the comments below what you guys are thinking ahead of the new season. Put your ladder predictions in there. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen across the 25-26 campaign. And if you do enjoy the video, make sure you hit the like button. And if you do like the content, consider hitting the subscribe button. We are trying to go for the 1K mark subscribers. We are almost there, so if you can help me on that road, I would be very, very grateful. But let's kick it off with the team that I'm going to be putting in 20th in this year's Premier League predictions, and for me, that is going to be Burnley. I personally just think that they do not have enough coming into this new season. I look at their squad. Yes, of course, a lot of people are going to point out the fact that they were very strong defensively last season. However, I watched them a decent amount last season in the Championship, and I always thought that they really lacked any sort of inventiveness in the final third. I never thought that they were a really exciting attacking team. They didn't score that many goals. And ultimately, coming up to the Premier League, I just don't think that they've strengthened their attack anywhere near enough. They brought in Broha, which is a good signing, but they've also lost players like Brownhill, Trafford, so they've lost some key players to their squad. Even Egan Riley as well, they lost on a free transfer. So they have lost a lot of players from that squad that got promoted last season, and I just don't feel like they've strengthened this squad anywhere near enough. And with Scott Parker in charge, who has not really done it at Premier League level as of yet, I'm not convinced by the signings that they've made so far, and for me personally, I just do not see them having enough firepower to score the amount of goals necessary to keep them up, even if they manage to do a decent job defensively. So for me, I think Burnley are going to be rock bottom, and at the moment, as it stands, I think that they're going to be quite a few points behind everyone else. But let's move into 19th, and this one is going to shock a few people. I've gone with Wolverhampton Wanderers. Yes, that is right. I've gone for them to get relegated. Last season, they were in a relegation battle for a decent chunk of the season, but the one player who continued to pull them out in multiple games was Mateus Cunha. He has now left the club to Manchester United this season, and they've also lost Ryan Ait-Nouri, who was a very creative player in that side as well. So they've lost so much of the players that scored and created their goals last season. When I look at this squad currently for Wolves, yes, they've got some good players, don't get me wrong. I like Agbadou as the centre-back. I like their midfielders in Andre and João Gomez. I really do like a couple of their players. I think Strand Larsen is a decent centre-forward. However, I look across their squad, and I just think it really lacks any sort of excitement within it. I don't think that there is any real attacking quality in there that really makes me think that they're going to score enough goals this season. And I just think that this could potentially be their year. I think that they've slept a little bit in the transfer market. They've kind of been poor in the transfer market for a few seasons now, and I have a feeling that this is the season it bites them in the backside and one of the promoted teams stays up and they go down. And that is what I think is going to happen, unfortunately, to Wolverhampton Wanderers this season. But coming in at number 18th as the team that I think is going to be the third club to be relegated in the Premier League this season, and it's going to be Leeds United. And I think that this one's going to be relatively close. I think the team that I have put in 17th is going to be neck and neck between these two. I really do think. I think Leeds United, I give them a decent chance. The problem with them is scoring goals. And I know last season they scored a lot of goals in the Championship, but transferring that into the Premier League is a completely different question. Obviously, Willy Gnonto has been a really good player for them. Can he translate the success he had last season into the Premier League? Solomon was good for them last season. They've lost him. Is Pirot going to be good enough to do it in the Premier League? You look at Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who they've also just brought in. You look at the other striker, Nemecha, that they've brought in. Not great injury records and goal scoring records in the last few years between those two players. I just do not see enough goals in this Leeds United side. And that is despite the fact that I actually think that they've done a good job recruiting in other areas of the pitch. I think Anton Stack is a really good signing for Leeds United. He adds height. He's a really good player who's played many years in the Bundesliga. He can play in multiple positions. He's athletic. I really do like that signing for Leeds United. And he's going to be a big player for them next season. And Altanaka as well in the midfield, who they already had in there, I think is a phenomenal midfielder. So I think that they've got a decent midfield. I like the signing that they made made of their new goalkeeper as well. They needed to bring a new goalkeeper in after Melier last season. He just was not good enough for them. So they've strengthened in the goalkeeper area. I just think that they might just lack the goal scoring power to really win games and pick up enough points to stay in the Premier League next season. And I think just for that reason, they might just fall short, despite the fact they've signed a lot of players who are quite big in size, that they look like they're going to want to compete physically next season in the Premier League. And maybe they change their style of play coming into the new season. I think that they have to if they want to stand a chance of survival. I think that they could stay up this season. But I just look at their forward line and it doesn't fill me with confidence. And for that reason, I'm going to put them in 18th. But coming in at number 17th in my Premier League table, and a team that I really do think could be on the knife edge of being relegated this season, is Brentford. And it's really shocking because over previous seasons, I've been so confident with this Brentford team and I've never put them anywhere near relegation. However, I think it's been a really worrying transfer window for them. They've lost, obviously, Thomas Frank, who was a massive part of their success and the reason why they've done such a good job in the Premier League since that they've been promoted. But Keith Andrews, as the manager coming into the new season, a very young coach, doesn't have any experience really at any level of managing a club like Brentford in the Premier League. I mean, I just really do think it's going to be a lot for him to do. I think he's going to struggle at times, and especially given the fact that they're losing Brian Mbuemo, they're losing potentially Johan Visa as well. They've lost Norgard. That is 3 massive players for Brentford, which did such a good job for Thomas Frank over so many years. You're almost ripping the heart out of this Brentford side coming into the new season. And I think that they could really struggle. I do not know how Keith Andrews is going to want them to play. I don't know how he's going to get them to try and set up. But it's not all doom and gloom for Brentford this season. They have brought in a couple of players. They brought in Kelleher, who I think is going to be really big for them next season. He's been proven at Premier League level when he's come in for Liverpool. When Alisson's been injured, he's done a really good job. So I think he'll be good for them next season. They've obviously also signed Malambo in the midfield, a young Dutch midfielder who is quite exciting, a player that could be a find for them next season. They brought in Jordan Henderson as well in the midfield, who's going to add some quality leadership into the team as well. And also they've got that Rodriguez up front, Thiago Rodriguez, who was injured at the beginning of last season, the striker they brought in the previous transfer window. We've not seen him so far, so it will be interesting to see if he can get some goals next season for them. That could help them. And as well as that as well, they've got Sharda, who had a really good season last season, scoring 11 goals in the Premier League. So I think overall, they've got enough to keep them in the Premier League. And it's the reason why I edged them above Leeds United, because I just think they've got more of an ability to score goals and stay in games. So I think, despite obviously, as I said, the heart being ripped out of this Brentford side, I still think they just have enough to stay up this season. But let's move on to 16th place, and I've gone with Sunderland. Now, I've seen a lot of people predicting Sunderland to finish in the bottom 3 this season. I personally do not think that that's going to happen. I look through this Sunderland squad at the moment, and it's really impressive. It's really exciting. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of bias here. I do support Sunderland. However, when you look at the squad coming into the new season, I look at the midfield specifically. You want to try and have a really good midfield in the Premier League. Granit Xhaka, Habib Diarra, and Enzo Lefebvre. That is easily a Premier League quality midfield. I do not think people realise the players that we've signed in there, in Habib Diarra specifically. I think a lot of people are sleeping on that signing. But also you look at the forward line. Giroud from Chelsea, whenever he's played last season, he looked good. He looked like he's capable of scoring a goal. Very promising forward. Adingra as well. Mayenda from last season up there as well, who's a good player. I think maybe there's another forward that needs to be signed. It does look like Sunderland are looking at signing another forward before the end of the window. And then in the back line as well, I thought a centre-back was much needed to be signed. Alderte has now been signed, a player with 4 years worth of La Liga experience. A good, promising young goalkeeper from the Dutch league who was in the Dutch team of the season last season. He is in goal for Sunderland next season. And obviously they've signed Ronaldo at left back as well. So I think there's a lot to be excited with the Sunderland team. There's a lot of quality there now, a lot of depth to the side. And I think that there's enough to keep Sunderland up in the Premier League. And I think also another aspect people are sleeping on is the manager. The manager is going to play a conservative style of football next season. It's going to be largely a counter-attacking style of football. And I think that they've recruited as well to that style, catching teams on the break with pace, trickery, goal-scoring ability. That is what I think the Sunderland team is going to be geared up to next season. And I think Sunderland are going to impress a lot of people, and I think they're going to finish 16th. Then moving on to 15th place, and I think this one's really going to shock a lot of people. I've gone with Crystal Palace in 15th this season, and I know that's going to shock a lot of people. People look at this Crystal Palace side right now and go, well, how could you put them in 15th place? Hear me out for a second. They are looking very likely, with the recent transfer reports coming out, to lose Mark Gahey coming into the new season and Eberiche Eze, and that is two of their best players. And I personally think that despite obviously them having a good manager, they're going to have Europe next season. I don't think they've got a lot of squad depth within their team. And I think that they could really struggle losing those two players next season alongside European football. So for me, when I look at Crystal Palace coming into the new season, yes, of course, at the moment, they look like they've got a relatively exciting team. They look like they could do something this season. I'm just looking at logistics of it. I'm looking at the fact they've got European football. They're going to lose a couple of the key members of their squad. And I think that they could struggle. I think that they will be absolutely safe from relegation. I don't think that they'll even be dragged into a relegation fight this season. But I think that they'll be a relatively mid-table team next season. Maybe they finish a little bit higher than 15th. But I've gone with 15th because I feel like with those two players specifically being lost, it could really hurt them coming into next season. And then for 14th, I've gone with another surprise. And I think a lot of people are going to be shocked at this one. I've gone with Nottingham Forest. I don't think that they are going to be able to replicate the season they had last season. They did phenomenally well to finish where they did. They secured European football. And I think that will hurt them this season. I don't think that they've improved that much. They brought in James McAtee, yes, but they've also lost Anthony Elanga. And I just think ultimately it's going to be a struggle of a season for Nottingham Forest. Again, I think they'll be completely clear of relegation. I don't think they'll have any worries in that regard. Again, I just look at their squad depth and I question coming into the new season whether they're going to be able to sustain a campaign in Europe and also alongside the Premier League. And I think that Nottingham Forest will try and do well in the Europa League this season. So for me personally, I have a feeling that Nottingham Forest, they'll be good in some games. I think that they're going to largely deploy the tactics they did last season on counter-attacking teams. I just think that they will lose a lot more games this season. And I think, unfortunately for them, alongside Europe, with the lack of squad depth, I just think that they probably will just finish quite averagely this season, and that's why I've gone with 14th for them. And then at 13th, I've gone with West Ham United, a team which absolutely has not had an impressive transfer window whatsoever. I think, though, one of the big things for West Ham next season is the fact they are not competing in Europe, and they do have players within their squad which are good enough to win them games. And when I look at the goal-scoring capabilities, I just think that they've got enough in that squad coming into the next season to be completely clear of relegation. I don't think they'll be dragged into any sort of relegation fight. I think Jarrod Bowen is going to score them enough goals next season. Somerville is also, we've not seen the best of him in a West Ham shirt so far. Fulkrug as well, they've still got, who I still think can maybe make an impact for them next season. They've obviously brought in Callum Wilson. Who knows whether he's even going to stay fit, let alone score goals for them next season. But they've got quality players throughout their side. They've got Souček. They've got, obviously, Paqueta in the midfield. They've got Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Tadibo, Kilman. They've got enough quality to get them through the season, despite, obviously, the board and the club behind the scenes being a little bit of a mess at the moment. I still think they've got enough to comfortably survive in the Premier League next season. They'll score enough goals. They'll win enough games. I just think that they're going to be pretty safe next season in the Premier League. But coming in at number 12 for me, I'm going to go with a team that really impressed me at times last season, and that is Bournemouth. And I really do rate Iraola as a manager, and he is the reason why I have got Bournemouth 12th in the Premier League, because they've lost such an amount of quality of defenders this transfer window. I mean, it's ridiculous. They've lost 4 of their 5 players that started the majority of their games in the back line last season. Kepa Arrizabalaga has gone to Arsenal. Kirkez has gone to Liverpool. Housen has gone to Real Madrid. And Zabani has gone to Paris Saint-Germain. And it tells you everything you need to know at the quality of clubs that all of those players went to, at why they did so well last season. And Iraola, I think, is a top manager, and therefore I think they'll be very comfortable. They'll score enough goals this season. I think they're going to leak a lot of goals. And I know obviously they brought in Petrovic from Chelsea. He's a decent signing. They've brought in Truffert, who I think will be a decent attacking option for them down the left-hand side. And they've brought in a centre-back in Diakite today. I just think they lack depth in that centre-back area. I know obviously they've still got a good centre-back as well in Senesi. I think he's a really good player. So they've still got a decent group of players in the defense. I just think they lack depth, and that if they pick up an injury, I do worry for them. But I think overall, they've got plenty enough to be very good throughout the season. They've got Christie in the midfield, who I really rate. They've also got Cook as well, who's a really good midfielder. They're just two industrious midfielders who just go about their work in the midfield so efficiently in there. And then also in the final third, I think they've got some exciting players. They got Semenyo, who had a really good season last season. They've also brought in a player called Krupi, who scored 22 goals in the second division of the French division last season, who's an exciting player, young, exciting, fresh. I think he could do something next season potentially for them. They've got that with Tara as well, who's a good player. Evan Nilsson is still at the club. They've got plenty of attacking options, and I think there's a couple, Justin Kluivert. So they've got plenty of attacking options next season. They'll score enough goals. I think they'll score a lot of goals next season. I just think they might concede quite a few. And for that reason, I'm going to put them mid-table. I'm going to put them 12th. And then coming in at 11th for me, I've gone with Fulham. And I think that this is a relatively safe prediction, to be honest. I think that they're going to finish somewhere within this area of the table. They've not got European football next season, which gives them an advantage over a couple of clubs in there that I've put behind them. But also on top of that, they've retained a lot of their quality coming into the next season, but they've also not lost much either. They've lost Willian, who was a player that they only had for the second half of last season. Anyway, they had Tom Kearney that they've now lost. He's 34 years of age. It's not too big of a loss for them. I think overall, they've not really done anything in the transfer window. They've got a good squad there. They've kept Anthony Robinson, which I thought was a player potentially they could lose in this window. And ultimately, I think they've got enough goals in there. Yes, they can leak goals at times, but they are an exciting team to watch. Maybe Emil Smith-Rowe has a better season this season as well. Who knows? I think there's enough in there to be relatively good this season, pick up enough points to finish in the mid-table. Maybe they could make a push into the top half of the table as well. I'm not writing them off, but for me, I'm going to put them in 11th. Now, moving into the top half of the table, I'm going to be starting off the top half with 10th position, obviously, and it's going to be Newcastle United, a team that has been competing, obviously, for Champions League, Europa League positions over the last couple of seasons. They got Champions League last season. I think they're going to massively regress this season, and I think it's quite obvious why. They've not really recruited that much in this window. It's been a disastrous transfer window for them. They've lost out on a lot of targets they wanted to get. It looks like Alexander Isak will be leaving. I know obviously there's a massive transfer saga. I expect him to leave to Liverpool this window. So ultimately, they need to replace him. There's been the rumours of obviously Nicholas Jackson, Johan Visa. Those two players could be coming to Newcastle, so that could bolster their options next season, but neither of them can replace the boots of Alexander Isak. I think with the Champions League as well next season for them, they needed to recruit in numbers. They needed to bring in depth. I don't think they brought in enough depth. Obviously, they brought in Thior as well, which will be a good centre-back option for them next season. I just think they're light. I don't think that they've got enough options. I think they might struggle at times next season, specifically in the Premier League. They might put all of their eggs in the basket of the Champions League. And for that reason, I think they might slip down the table a little bit. They've still got quality in there, so I think they'll still compete. They'll still do well, but I'm going to put them 10th in the Premier League. And then coming in at number 9th, and this is a pick that I'm very excited by next season, and that is Everton. I think that under David Moyes, in the second half of the season last season, we saw a change in Everton from the Sean Dyche Everton that we saw. I genuinely believed that when David Moyes took over, I thought he was going to do a very similar job to Sean Dyche because they didn't have much attacking quality in there. And they managed to score much more goals under David Moyes. They were much more of a threat. They went for games more. And they were a more exciting team to watch. And I just think with some of the signings that they've made in this window, they brought in that Barry, who's an industrious forward, who scored 11 goals in La Liga last season. He's young. He could even be better this season for Everton. And they've also brought in Jack Grealish. They brought in a few midfielders, including Dewsbury Hall. I really like them coming into the new season. And I think this Everton team really could do something. And I think outside shout, they could even push for Europe. I don't want to go too far, and that's why I've gone with them in 9th. But I think Everton will be exciting next season, especially in the new stadium. I think there's going to be a bit more life about them this season, and that's good. We want to see a good competitive Everton in the Premier League, and I think we're going to get that this season. But moving into number 8th position, and I've gone with Aston Villa. I think they're going to slip down the table a little bit from what they were last season. They are obviously back in the Europa League again for this season. I think they'll probably try and go all the way in the Europa League, especially in this new format under Unai Emery. And I think that might have a little bit of a tax on their Premier League performance this season. So I think there might be a little bit of a regression this season. They obviously haven't done that much in the transfer market to go and kick on for next season. One player I do like that they've bought, though, is that Guessand from Liga. I think he's a good player. He's going to score a few goals for them in the coming season, adds an extra attacking threat for them. And I think they've got enough. I think that they've obviously got players like Morgan Rogers. They've kept Ollie Watkins, who's a really good centre forward. They've got players in the midfield like Onana, Kamara. They've also got, Yuri Tillemans as well, who's a phenomenal player in there as well. Defensively, they're decent. They've not lost Emi Martinez, with a lot of people thought as well. I think overall, Aston Villa will be solid next season. They'll lose a few games, of course. I think that, as I said, the Europa League will tax on them in the Premier League. And I think 8th is a sensible finish for them, given the fact that I think they will go far in the Europa League under Unai Emery next season. And then in at number 7, and unfortunately this is going to make the top 6 quite boring, but I've gone with Brighton. I think they are probably the most likely to have a push for Europe this season. They've got a very young side as usual under a young coach, but I think that they could do something this season. They don't have European football. They're one of the few teams of, the quality to be able to push for those European spots that doesn't have European football. I think with the exciting talents that they've got, alongside the fact as well, they've brought in some good players this window. That Boscagli that they've brought in from the Eredivisie, from PSV. He is a really good centre-back. It's an absolutely superb acquisition for them. I think it's going to really bolster them next season. And I've always thought that I've always thought that Brighton's biggest weakness has been defensively. I've always thought that they've been a great, exciting team to watch going forward. But defensively, I've questioned them. They've brought in that Boscagli. They've brought in De Kuipers as well from the Pro League, not the Bundesliga, the Pro League in Belgium. He's a really good left back as well. So I'm expecting them to be a bit more solid in defensive areas next season. Obviously, the manager as well, he likes to set up in a more defensive shape than other previous Brighton managers. And they've got attacking quality as well. And so with the depth of their attacking quality, with a really quite strong midfield, especially if they keep Baleba in there for the coming season, and on top of the fact that I think that they're going to be a bit more defensively solid this season as well, and the fact they got no European football, and some of their competitors do have European football, I think that it gives them a decently good chance of being able to push for a European place next season. And therefore, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to finish in the Europa Conference League spots in 7th place. And unfortunately, that means that the big 6 clubs in the Premier League finish in my top 6 for the Premier League next season. And I know obviously that hasn't been happening in previous years. I just think that this is the season where it's going to happen. And in the team that I've gone in the 6th position, I've got Tottenham Hotspur. Now, they've obviously got the Champions League heading into next season as well, which is a reason why I've put them in this position. They've got a new manager in Thomas Frank, who I think is going to be a very different manager from Ange Postecoglou. Postecoglou loved to open up and attack teams. I think Thomas Frank will be a lot more measured. He'll be defensively responsible and look for trying to make the most out of the players they have in the final third. And I think that will be a very different Tottenham team next season. But I think they'll do well alongside the Champions League. A 6th place position, I think, would be a really solid finish for them. I think you look across the squad, they've got a lot of quality in there. You obviously, you look at the back line, you've got Jed Spence and Udogie can both play in that left back position. You've got Coutinho Romero and Van der Ven as the centre-backs. You've got Danso and Dragusin as both the backups for them. You've got Porro at right back. Archie Gray can play across the back line. Then into the midfield, I think Palhinha is going to be such a big part of them next season. I've thought for years that what Tottenham have desperately needed is a defensive midfielder to plug the gap in there. Someone who's just going to get about the park, doesn't care about anything else, but just winning the ball. That is exactly what João Palhinha is. I think he's going to be big for them next season, especially under Thomas Frank. Alongside as well, someone like Bentancur, who's got the technical quality. And also there's like Pape Sarr as well, who can play in there. But when you look at the forward line, that's maybe the area where I'm a little bit concerned about them. They've got talented players, but do they have proven goal scorers? Dom Solanke, Kudus. You look at players like Kulusevski. I think they might need to bring in someone else. Obviously, they've been linked to Savinho. If they get Savinho and Eze, that would be 2 sensational signings for them. I think maybe in the forward areas, they might lack a little bit in terms of just guaranteed goals. But I think outside of that, they've got a good squad, a good manager. I think they'll be a lot more measured next season. And alongside the Champions League, I think sixth spot will be a good finish for them considering last season. Then coming in at number 5 for me is Manchester United. And I think they're going to have a good season. I think they could have a real crack at even getting into the top 4 this season. I know some people might think I'm crazy considering how bad they were last season. A lot of people don't have faith in Ruben Amorim. I've got faith in Ruben Amorim. I think he's a good manager. I think he proved himself before he went to Manchester United that he is a capable manager, and I think that he will get it right this season. They've had a full preseason to get the squad fit. They've been able to weed out some of the dead weed of the squad as well. Players like Garnacho, Rashford have all been able to get out the club. Everyone's going to be buying into Amorim's system. They've signed players specifically for the system as well. They've brought in attackers who are going to score goals and create goals, which is big for them. I mean, last season, one of their biggest issues was scoring goals, creating chances. They've just brought in 3 new forwards who have completely revolutionized their forward line. In Mateus Cunha, who was a very good creator last season as well, a goal scorer. They brought in Sesko as well, who, if you've seen him strike a ball before, this kid is dangerous. He doesn't have a proven track record, but he is young, he's talented, and he's dangerous. And on top of that as well, Mbeumo, who was obviously sensational last season for Brentford. So I think that they've completely revolutionized their forward line. Without European football this season, I think there's going to be a massive benefit for them. They can focus on the Premier League. They're going to be fitter. They're going to know exactly what Ruben Amorim expects of them. I think Manchester United could do well this season, and I would not be surprised, despite me putting them in 5th, if they break into the top 4 this season and completely shock everyone. It would not surprise me whatsoever. And so, though, it brings us on to the top 4, and this is very interesting. I feel like a lot of people have gone with the same sort of teams in the top 4, and in different orders. And for me, I'm going to have a very different order to what a lot of people put it in, and I'm going to start off with my 4th position as Arsenal Football Club. Now, some people will be very shocked by that one. Something doesn't feel right about Arsenal coming into this season for me. And the reason why I say that is because of the pressure, right? I think there's a lot of pressure on this Arsenal team specifically to make it happen this season, whether it's in the Champions League, the Premier League, even in an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup, to get some sort of trophy. I think the pressure is going to be massively on. And I think if they have a couple of bad performances, the crowd could get upon them. I've seen a lot of people talking about Arsenal fans talking about the club saying, oh, I'm not sure about Arteta anymore. And I think that if they do have a bad couple of games, the pressure could really grow and the atmosphere could get a little bit toxic. I'm not saying it will, but it could get toxic. And despite the fact that I think they've made some good signings, Gyökeres, I think he's a really good centre forward. I don't think he'll score as many goals as what some people think. I've seen some people saying he might even win the Golden Boot. I'm not going to go that far, but I do think he'll score a good amount of goals next season, between the range of 15 to 20, maybe even a little bit more than 20. Zubimendi is a really good signing. I think he'll get Arsenal ticking a lot more next season. He'll be making those passes forward. I think that they've got a decent squad. I just think it could go wrong for them this season. Maybe they struggle to link up a little bit with Gyökeres. Maybe off of the left-hand side, they don't have enough depth. Maybe they just, they do score the same amount of goals. They just, instead of having them spread around the squad, they're more focused on Gyökeres. And I don't know. I just have a little bit of a bad feeling about Arsenal coming into the new season. This could just be me. They could absolutely tear it up. I could be completely wrong. I just think that it could go wrong for them this season. And I've got a little bit of a gut feeling. So I'm putting them in 4th. And then coming in at number 3 for me is Chelsea Football Club. And the reason why I've gone with them in number 3 is because of the depth of quality which they have across their squad. And there is an area of their team, or there's 2 specific areas of their team which worry me coming into the new season, which does give me a little bit of nervousness in putting them in 3rd place, which is the centre-back and the goalkeeper role. And I guess we should start there because they are the glaring obvious issues with Chelsea at the moment. I think that they will sign a centre-back. I think that the injury of Levi Colwill will prompt them to go and sign a centre-back. So I think that they will get a centre-back in there alongside, obviously, the options of Tosin, Fofana, and also Chalobah, who is a really good centre-back as well, who did a good job for them last season. So obviously, they've got players like Badiashile as well, and they've got Disasi, but I'm not really regarding them because I don't think they're good enough for Chelsea. But they've got enough options there, especially if they go and sign another centre-back. They've got Hato as well, who they've just signed, a really promising player who can also play at centre-back as well. They've got Cucurella at left-back. Hato as well, as I just said, can play in that left-back position. In the right-back position, they've got James and Gusto. So I think overall, they're quite set. The reason why I'm not going to predict them for a Premier League title or even put them in the contention for a Premier League title race next season is because the goalkeeper situation. Robert Sanchez is not a good enough goalkeeper to win the Premier League. It's just as simple as that. I am shocked that they're coming into another season with Robert Sanchez as their goalkeeper. That is the reason why I'm a little bit nervous about putting them in this position. However, I look across the rest of their squad. They're stacked. And especially if they bring in some of the players that they're linked to in this window, I mean, my word, they could be a real threat coming into next season. They're obviously linked to Xavi Simons and Garnacho at the moment. If they get them, alongside having the options of Neto, Esteval, who's a very young, promising player in those wide positions, Cole Palmer, and even when you look in the front line as well, you've got João Pedro and Delap. They've got so much quality of depth across that forward line that I think that they will be in a good position to compete across all fronts next season. And they've got enough goals in that front line to give me confidence that they can definitely get into the top four. And then when I look at the central midfield as well, that's probably the best area of this Chelsea team at the moment. They've got so much depth of quality in that central midfield. You look at the two, which I would start in there, Caicedo and Latvia. They are two of the best midfielders in the Premier League. Latvia has not fully exploded onto the scene yet because of injuries, but that boy is a sensational midfielder. I think he is, as soon as he gets an injury-free season under his belt, people will realise just how good of a midfielder he is. Alongside Enzo Fernandez as well, who can play in the attacking midfield role. He showed that he can get forward and score goals running into the box, but also he can play in the deeper areas as well as also having a player that not many people know about, but Andre Santos, a player who had a really good season last season in the French division. I think that they are absolutely stacked in the middle of the park, in the forward area of the park. They've got enough depth across the back line, in my opinion, especially if they go bring in another centre-back. The one area is the goalkeeper, and that's why I don't have confidence to finish in the top two. But outside of that, I think they're in a really good position to do well next season. But let's move into the top two. Who is going to finish in the number one position in my Premier League predictions for next season? It's between Manchester City and Liverpool, two teams that have massively recruited in the transfer window. Both teams have had massive rebuilds. Even though Liverpool won the league last season, they've had a massive rebuild. City have as well after a disappointing campaign last season. But who goes in at number one for me? Manchester City. And of course, I'm going to start off with Liverpool first because they are the second pick. I've gone with Liverpool for the sheer reason that I think last season, the reason why Arne Slot did so well at Liverpool was because he had that unit of players which he relied upon. They played together for so many years. He didn't really make any recruitment when he first came in. He waited till this window to do so. And because that was a unit of players that was so used to playing with each other, knew how to win games together, other than maybe Gravenberch was the only one, I think that it might impact them coming into the new season. Despite the fact I think they've got better with the individuals they've recruited, it could take time to gel all of these players into a new team because they've signed a lot of players. And their first 11 next season is going to look wildly different to their first 11 from last season. You got to think, they're bringing in a new right back in Frimpong. They're bringing in a new left back in Kirkez. They're bringing in a new centre forward in Ekitike. Potentially even another forward in Alexander Isak as well, which I do think will happen. They've obviously got Florian Wirtz, who's just come in. And all of these are sensational footballers. Do not get me wrong. But that is 5 players to bring into your team to potentially start as new players within the team. And I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for these Liverpool players to be able to figure out what their role is in the team and just gel as a unit with all of the recruitment that's been done. And of course, on top of that as well, we've got to ask the question of where does Salah fit into this team? And it's a wild question to ask, but just hear me out for a second. When I watched the Community Shield for Liverpool, everything went through Florian Wirtz. Last season, everything went in an attacking sense through Mohamed Salah. So the question is as well, is what's Salah's role in this team next season? I just think there's a lot of questions with this Liverpool team. No doubt they've got a sensational football team and they could easily go and win the league. There's no doubt about that. I just think that there's a couple questions for me with this Liverpool team where I question whether they're going to gel together next season. And I think that potentially what Liverpool are doing here is they're signing so much quality. I think that next season and beyond, they could dominate the Premier League potentially, depending on, maybe Pep Guardiola leaves Manchester City aren't at the level we've previously been at, and Liverpool can dominate for years to come. I think that maybe this season, is the transition season that people were expecting last season, if that makes sense. And that obviously means that Manchester City are in first position, and a lot of people have been putting some wild predictions down for Manchester City next season. I think Manchester City are the most slept on team in the Premier League next season. I really do believe that. And there's not just one reason, there's multiple reasons, but I'm going to give the most obvious reason. Pep Guardiola. To sleep on Pep Guardiola to the degree that some people are doing, I think is crazy. I've seen people put Manchester City in 4th. I've even seen 5th place positions for Manchester City in the table. I think it's dangerous the way people are predicting Manchester City at the moment. I think that this is a young, hungry, exciting Manchester City squad with a lot of depth of quality across the squad. You go through the forward line, you've got Haaland up front, who's just a guarantee of goals. You've got Marmoush, who proved himself to be a top forward towards the end of last season, and obviously when he was at Frankfurt, he was unbelievable as well. And then obviously look across the rest of the front line. You've got Oscar Bob off the right-hand side, Shirky, Phil Foden, Jeremy Doku. We don't know what's going to happen with Savinho at the moment. Is he going to go to Tottenham? If he goes to Tottenham, it looks like Manchester City are potentially bringing in Rodrigo from Real Madrid, which would be absolutely unbelievable. And then on top of that as well, you go further down in the squad to the central midfield areas. You've got Tijani Reinders and Rodri for a pivot next season. Now, Rodri's going to be out for a period of time, but when he comes back and he gets fully fit, those two in midfield will dominate games. We brought in Nico Gonzalez as well to fill in for when Rodri's not there, so that will be an important signing. Bernardo Silva, as the captain, is still in the team. He will play in the central areas. I think he's a good player in the central midfield as a double pivot. And I think there's enough options in there. So I think that Manchester City will cut out the lack of physicality that was in the midfield last season and the reason why City will cut open so much. And I think that that's maybe an area which people are underestimating about City and saying that there's so much defensive frailties in this team at the moment. I don't think people realize what the issue was last season. It was the central midfield. That was the key issue. And I do think that we've got players to be able to add physicality to that midfield and make sure that we don't get cut open as easy. Now, coming to the defensive line, I can understand why some people will criticize Manchester City's defensive options coming into the new season. At right back specifically, I understand it. We could be getting a better right back in there for sure. I think there's enough options in there to be able to cover in that role. Obviously, you've got Mateus Nunes, you can play as the attacking right back that gets up and down the pitch, who has that athleticism and pace and quality delivery into the box. But if you want a more defensive option, there is Manuel Akanji in the squad at the moment. There is Abdulkadir Kusanov, who is, I think, good enough to play in that right-back position and adds bundles of pace. And then, of course, in the centre-back areas, you've also got Rico Lewis, who can play in the right-back role as well, against maybe teams that Manchester City are going to dominate against. Rico Lewis can play in that right mid position and come into the midfield. But you've also got in the central area, the defence, an area which got depleted so much last season through injuries. There is an abundance of options coming into this season. You've got Josko Gvardiol, Ruben Diaz, who will be the starting two centre-backs. But behind that, you've got John Stones, you've got Kusanov, you've got Akanji. There's another centre-back as well who I'm forgetting about. Yes, Nathan Ake as well, who can also play as a left centre-back. And then also in the left-back position, again, there's options in there for Manchester City. Nori is the attacking option in the team. A lot of people are saying that, well, there's two attacking fullbacks. You can supplement a attacking fullback with a defensive fullback on the other side. For example, Manchester City have Nori on that left-back position. If Manchester City were playing Mateus Nunes, you would likely see a Nathan Ake in the left-back role. Maybe Josko Gvardiol. Maybe Nico O'Reilly in those left-back roles. So there's other options in which you can play in that role to help the team defensively in that area. And then, of course, in the goalkeeper position, we don't really know what's happening at the moment. It could be Gigi Donnarumma. It could be Ederson. Either way, I'm confident that either one of those two, backed up by Trafford next season, is good enough to keep enough clean sheets and be a good goalkeeper in goal. There'll be two very different goalkeepers, either Donnarumma or Ederson, without a doubt. But I'm confident in either one of them. So for me, I think Manchester City have got enough to go and win a Premier League next season. I think Pep Guardiola will invent a system. I think these players look hungry. There's a lot of energy in the team at the moment. There's a lot of youth as well, which Manchester City didn't have last season. And I think we're massively slept on coming into the new season. I think we're going to score a ton of goals. I think we're going to be very exciting. And I think we're going to win the Premier League next season. But as I said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win the Premier League next season? Who do you think is going to finish in the top four? Give me your full predictions in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of my content. I'm trying to hit that 1K mark. If you could help me across it, I'd be very, very thankful. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.